What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to find himself facing a host determined to tear him down on live television? What you're about to witness is the moment Denzel Washington reached his breaking point. And trust me, you've never seen anything like this before. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about daytime television. The studio lights were blazing hot that Tuesday morning, as Denzel Washington walked onto the View set, his usual composed demeanor intact. He'd done hundreds of interviews over his decades-long career, but something felt different about this one. The energy in the room was electric, almost hostile, as he settled into the guest chair across from the panel of hosts. Joy Behar leaned forward in her seat, a predatory smile playing across her lips as she shuffled through her notes. She'd been waiting for this moment, planning her attack for weeks. The other co-hosts seemed unusually quiet, almost as if they sensed what was coming. "Denzel, welcome to The View," Joy began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I have to say, it's interesting timing for you to be here promoting your new film, especially given some of the, shall we say, questionable choices you've made recently." Denzel's eyebrows furrowed slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Good morning, Joy. I'm not sure I follow what you mean by questionable choices. Could you be more specific?" Joy's smile widened, and she leaned back in her chair like a cat toying with its prey. "Well, let's talk about your recent comments regarding faith and family values. Some people are saying you're out of touch with modern America, that your views are, how should I put this delicately, antiquated." The tension in the studio was palpable. Camera operators exchanged glances, and the audience sat in stunned silence. This wasn't the typical celebrity interview they'd come to expect from The View. Denzel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained controlled. "I've always been open about my faith and my belief in strong family values. I don't see how that makes me out of touch. If anything, I think those values are more important now than ever." "But don't you think," Joy interrupted, her voice rising slightly, "that your platform gives you a responsibility to evolve with the times? I mean, some of your statements could be seen as judgmental, even harmful to certain communities." The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. Denzel's publicist, watching from the wings, looked ready to intervene, but Denzel held up a subtle hand gesture, signaling her to stay back. "Joy, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding here," Denzel replied, his tone still measured, but with an edge creeping in. "Having faith and believing in traditional values doesn't make someone judgmental or harmful. It means I have principles that guide my life and my work." Joy scoffed. Actually scoffed, right there on live television. "Principles? Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I sit, it looks more like you're using your celebrity status to push an agenda that frankly belongs in the past century." The audience began to murmur. Some viewers at home were already reaching for their phones, sensing that something unprecedented was unfolding. Denzel's hands, which had been resting calmly on the arm of his chair, now gripped the fabric slightly. "An agenda?" Denzel's voice carried a note of disbelief. "Joy, I came here today to talk about my film, about the craft of acting, about the stories we tell and why they matter. I didn't come here to be ambushed or to have my character assassinated on live television." "Oh, please," Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Nobody's assassinating your character. I'm simply asking you to account for the impact of your words. When you talk about faith and family the way you do, you're essentially telling millions of Americans that their lifestyles are wrong." Denzel leaned forward in his chair, his composure beginning to crack. "That's not what I'm saying at all, and you know it. You're twisting my words, putting meanings into them that were never there." "Am I?" Joy's voice took on a mocking tone. "Because I have quotes here, Denzel. Direct quotes from interviews where you've made some pretty clear statements about how people should live their lives." She held up a stack of papers, waving them dramatically. The camera zoomed in, catching every micro-expression on Denzel's face, as he realized this wasn't just an impromptu attack. This was a calculated assault. "Those quotes," Denzel said slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, "were taken from a conversation about my personal journey, about how faith has guided me through difficult times in my life. They were never meant as judgments on how others should live. But that's how they come across," Joy pressed on relentlessly. "And when someone with your influence speaks that way, it has consequences. Real consequences for real people." The studio felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Denzel's eyes flashed with something the audience had never seen before. A glimpse of the man behind the carefully crafted public persona. "Joy," he said, his voice now carrying a warning tone. "I've spent my entire career trying to tell stories that matter, that inspire people, that bring out the best in humanity. I've never once used my platform to tear people down or to make them feel less than. Can you say the same?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Joy's smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered, her attack becoming even more vicious. "Don't you dare turn this around on me," she snapped. "I'm not the one who needs to answer for outdated thinking. I'm not the one whose comments have hurt people." Hurt people? Denzel's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger beginning to break through his professional facade. "The only person I see hurting people right now is sitting across from me, using her platform to attack a guest who came here in good faith." The audience was completely silent now, watching in fascination and horror as one of their most beloved actors faced off against one of daytime television's most controversial hosts. The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. Joy leaned forward aggressively. "Good faith? You call coming on this show and spouting your narrow-minded views good faith? You call refusing to acknowledge the harm your words cause good faith?" Denzel stood up slowly, his full height and presence filling the screen. The cameras captured every inch of his 6-foot frame as he looked down at Joy with an expression that could have melted steel. Narrow-minded. His voice was quiet again, but it carried the weight of decades of experience, of struggle, of triumph. "Lady, you don't know the first thing about my mind or my heart. You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear down a man you've never met, based on words you've chosen to misinterpret." The confrontation was reaching a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. This was no longer just a disagreement between a host and a guest. This was something much more fundamental. A clash between two completely different worldviews, playing out in real time for millions to see. Joy wasn't backing down. If anything, seeing Denzel stand up seemed to fuel her fire even more. She leaned back in her chair with a smirk that screamed arrogance, clearly enjoying the power she felt she held in this moment. "Oh, so now you're going to intimidate me?" Joy said, with a laugh that sounded more like a cackle. "Typical. When men like you can't handle being questioned, you resort to physical intimidation." The accusation hit the studio like a lightning bolt. Gasps could be heard from the audience, and the other co-hosts looked absolutely mortified. Denzel's eyes widened in disbelief at what he just heard. Physical intimidation? Denzel's voice carried a tone of complete shock. "Joy, I stood up because I have respect for myself and for this conversation. Something that clearly isn't being reciprocated here. But if you want to twist that into something threatening, that says everything about you and nothing about me." "Does it?" Joy shot back, her voice dripping with condescension. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you can't handle a strong woman asking you tough questions. Is that what they taught you in all those church services you love to talk about?" The cheap shot at his faith was the spark that lit the fuse. Denzel's entire demeanor shifted, and for the first time in the interview, his legendary composure completely cracked. "Stop," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "Just stop right there. You want to attack my views? Fine. You want to disagree with my perspective? Go ahead. But you will not sit there and mock my faith. And you will not twist my standing up into some kind of threat." Joy's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. She'd gotten the reaction she wanted, and she was going in for the kill. "I'm not twisting anything. I'm simply pointing out the pattern. You can't handle criticism, so you get aggressive. You can't handle modern thinking, so you hide behind outdated beliefs." Outdated beliefs. Denzel's voice rose again. And this time, there was no containing the emotion. "You think faith is outdated? You think believing in something bigger than yourself is outdated? Lady, let me tell you what's outdated. What's outdated is using your platform to tear people down instead of building them up." The confrontation was spiraling beyond anything anyone had expected. The show's producer was frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, but nobody seemed to know how to stop what was happening. Joy wasn't finished. "Oh, please, spare me the lecture about building people up. You've made a career out of playing the same characters over and over. The noble man, the moral authority. But when real life calls for you to show some growth, some evolution, you fall back on the same tired talking points." That was it. That was the moment Denzel Washington truly lost it on The View. His face transformed into something the audience had never seen before. A mixture of righteous indignation and barely controlled fury. "You want to talk about my career?" His voice was now booming through the studio. "You want to question my work? I've spent 40 years in this business trying to tell stories that matter, trying to portray characters with dignity and strength. I've played kings and slaves, soldiers and fathers, heroes and broken men. And every single role I've taken has been about finding the humanity in people, about showing their struggles and their triumphs." Joy tried to interrupt, but Denzel wasn't having it. For the first time in the entire interview, he completely took control. "No, you've had your turn to talk. Now it's mine," he said, his hand cutting through the air. "You sit here every day on this show, and what do? You tear people down. You mock. You ridicule. You attack. You take complex human beings with real struggles and real beliefs, and you reduce them to punchlines for your audience's entertainment. The studio was dead silent, except for the sound of Denzel's voice echoing off the walls. Even the camera operator seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep filming this unprecedented breakdown of a daytime talk show. "And you have the audacity," Denzel continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, "to sit there and lecture me about growth and evolution? You've been doing the same act for decades. The same bitter, cynical routine that treats every guest like they're here for your personal amusement." Joy's face had gone pale, but her stubborn streak wouldn't let her back down. "I'm not bitter. I'm honest. I ask the questions that matter. The questions that hold people accountable." "Accountable?" Denzel laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Accountable to who?" "To you. Who made you the moral authority on how people should think and believe? Who gave you the right to sit in judgment of everyone who walks through that door?" The other co-hosts were looking back and forth between them like spectators at a tennis match, completely helpless to intervene in what had become a full-scale verbal warfare. "I have the right," Joy said, her voice shaking slightly now, "because I have a platform, and I use it to speak truth to power." "Truth to power?" Denzel's voice cracked with disbelief. "Joy, you are the power. You have a national television show, millions of viewers, corporate backing. You're not some crusading journalist speaking truth to power. You're the establishment attacking anyone who doesn't think exactly like you do." The accusation hit home, and Joy's composure finally began to slip. "That's not true. I fight for the underdog. I fight for people who don't have a voice." "Do you?" Denzel challenged, stepping closer to the panel. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you fight for ratings. You create controversy because controversy sells. You attack people like me because you know it'll get people talking, get people watching." Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time in the entire confrontation, she seemed to be at a loss for words. "And the really sad part," Denzel continued, his voice now dropping to a more conversational tone, but losing none of its intensity, "is that you probably started this career wanting to do something meaningful. You probably had dreams of making a difference, of using television to bring people together, to educate, to inspire." The observation was so unexpectedly personal and insightful that it seemed to hit Joy like a physical blow. Her carefully constructed armor of cynicism and aggression began to crack. "But somewhere along the way," Denzel went on, "you decided that tearing people down was easier than building them up. You decided that conflict was more profitable than conversation. And now here you are, using your position to ambush guests who come here in good faith." Joy tried to rally, to find some comeback, but the fight seemed to have gone out of her. "I'm doing my job," she said weakly. "Is this your job?" Denzel asked, his voice now almost gentle, but still carrying tremendous weight. "Is attacking people's faith your job? Is twisting their words your job? Is creating division and hostility your job?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, and Joy had no answers. The woman who always had something to say, who never backed down from a fight, sat there in stunned silence. "Because if that's your job," Denzel said, "then maybe it's time to find a new line of work." The silence that followed Denzel's last words was deafening. Joy sat there, her mouth slightly open, staring at him with a mixture of shock and something that might have been recognition. For a moment, it seemed like the entire studio had forgotten how to breathe. But Joy Behar hadn't survived decades in television by backing down from a fight, even when she was clearly losing. Her recovery was swift, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a desperate edge that revealed just how rattled she really was. "How dare you?" she said, her voice trembling with a combination of rage and humiliation. "How dare you come into my house and tell me how to do my job? You're an actor, Denzel. You pretend to be other people for a living. What gives you the right to lecture me about truth and honesty?" Denzel looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Joy, this isn't your house. This is a television studio where guests are supposed to be treated with basic respect and dignity. And you're right, I am an actor. But being an actor has taught me something that you seem to have forgotten." "Oh, enlighten me," Joy spat, sarcasm dripping from every word. "It's taught me how to listen," Denzel replied calmly. "Every role I've ever played required me to understand that characters' motivations, their fears, their hopes, their pain. I had to find the humanity in them, even the ones I disagreed with. But you don't listen. You wait for your turn to attack." Joy's face flushed red. "I listen plenty. I listen to the pain your narrow views cause real people in the real world." "No," Denzel said firmly, shaking his head. "You listen for ammunition. You listen for ways to twist what people say into something you can use against them. There's a difference between hearing someone's words and understanding their heart." The other co-hosts were practically invisible at this point, pressed back into their chairs as if they could disappear entirely. The audience was completely captivated, witnessing something that felt more like a masterclass in human psychology than a daytime television interview. Joy tried a different tactic, her voice becoming more shrill and desperate. You think you're so wise, so enlightened, but you're just another celebrity who thinks his fame gives him the right to preach to the rest of us. I'm not preaching to anyone, Denzel said, his voice steady and controlled again. I shared my personal beliefs in other interviews because I was asked about them. I never forced them on anyone. Never said others had to live the way I live. But you've spent the last 20 minutes trying to force your beliefs on me, trying to make me apologize for who I am. That's not what I'm doing, Joy protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Denzel challenged. You brought me here under false pretenses. You told my people this would be a conversation about my new film, about my career. Instead, you ambushed me with a political attack designed to make me look bad and make you look like some kind of crusader for justice. Joy's jaw dropped. I did not ambush you. I asked legitimate questions. Legitimate. Denzel's eyebrows shot up. Joy, you accused me of physical intimidation for standing up. You mocked my faith. You suggested I was harmful to entire communities. You called my life's work outdated and irrelevant. If that's your idea of legitimate journalism, then the profession is in worse shape than I thought. The cameras captured every micro-expression on Joy's face as the weight of her behavior throughout the interview began to sink in. She looked around the studio as if seeing it for the first time, perhaps realizing how her actions appeared to the millions watching at home. I was doing my job, she said again. But this time, it sounded more like she was trying to convince herself than anyone else. Your job, Denzel said slowly, should be to inform and engage your audience, not to ambush your guests and create unnecessary conflict. Your job should be to explore different perspectives, not to attack anyone who doesn't share your worldview. Joy's composure was completely shattered now. You don't understand the pressures of this business. The expectations. Don't I? Denzel asked, and for the first time, his voice carried a note of genuine sadness. Joy, I've been in the entertainment business for 4 decades. I understand pressure. I understand expectations. I understand what it's like when executives and producers push you to be something you're not comfortable being. The admission seemed to catch Joy off guard. She looked at him with confusion, as if she'd forgotten that underneath the movie star exterior was a human being who had faced his own struggles and challenges. But here's what I learned a long time ago, Denzel continued. You can't let the business change who you are at your core. You can't let ratings and controversy become more important than basic human decency. Because when you do that, you lose yourself. Joy's eyes filled with tears, though whether they were tears of frustration, anger, or something deeper was impossible to tell. You think I've lost myself? I think, Denzel said gently, that somewhere along the way, you forgot that the people you interview are human beings with feelings, with families, with their own struggles and triumphs. You started seeing them as content instead of people. The brutal honesty of the statement hung in the air between them. Joy looked down at her notes, at the stack of papers she'd used to attack him earlier. And for a moment, it seemed like she might actually break down on live television. This interview was supposed to be about your movie, she said quietly, almost to herself. It still can be, Denzel replied, extending what felt like an olive branch. We can start over. We can have a real conversation instead of a battle. Joy looked up at him, and for just a moment, the mask slipped completely. The audience could see past the confrontational host to the person underneath, someone who maybe had gotten lost in the pursuit of ratings and relevance. But the moment didn't last. Joy's walls went back up, her defenses reassembled themselves, and she shook her head. No, I think we've said enough. Denzel nodded slowly, understanding that the opportunity for redemption had passed. Yes, I think we have. He turned to face the cameras directly, speaking past Joy to address the audience that had witnessed this unprecedented confrontation. I want to thank everyone who tuned in today. I hope that what you've seen here reminds you that we're all human beings, that we all have something to offer, and that we should treat each other with respect, even when we disagree. With that, he walked off the set, leaving Joy sitting there in stunned silence, the weight of what had just transpired settling over the studio like a heavy blanket. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing Joy's face as she struggled to process what had just happened, before finally cutting to commercial. But for the millions who had watched this explosive encounter, the images and words would linger long after the television was turned off. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a moment of truth, a glimpse behind the curtain of daytime television, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments happen when people stop performing and start being real. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Did Denzel go too far, or was Joy completely out of line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more unbelievable celebrity moments that you won't see anywhere.